Come
No,
in.
thank you.
Scott, yeah.
I'm good. Doesn't taste great with my coffee.
You know what I'm missing? Boa yellow. That lasted like 2 seconds.
Oh yeah, that stuff is
All right,
good.
Mr. Vice Chair, hold on. Go screen.
Is right.
It's going.
I'm right here.
Mhm.
Good.
You're good.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for Monday, October 17th. First item of business tonight is establish quorum, and let the record reflect we do have a established quorum. Item number 2, the approval of meeting minutes from October 3rd, 2022 meeting.
Like to make a motion?
Yes, ma'am.
Like to make a motion to approve the minutes from October 3rd, 2022.
Good motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Scott. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye as well. Motion approved for the meeting minutes for October 3rd, 2022. Recognizing persons not on the agenda. Let the record show no one has stepped forward to be recognized. Item number 4, conflict of interest declaration. Has any commission received any information pertaining to, otherwise had any contact with any person regarding any items of this planning and zoning agenda? If so, please set forward the nature of the content or contact. And did you want to say something, Mr. Schroeder?
Yeah, so I actually answer that question first, members of the commission.
No.
None.
None.
And then the way I'm going to end up with this being rewritten, does any commissioner or commissioner's employer or commissioner's family member have an economic interest in any procedure or action before the commission at this meeting? You do?
None.
No.
I was nodding in agreement.
No.
Are you still a real estate agent?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I am.
How is that not an economic impact to
Eco-
housing development?
Economic interest is defined in the statute, which I can provide you after the meeting. So in other words, do they have an interest in this piece of property? An
Which
economic
we do
interest
not.
in this piece of property, which she does not. Okay.
We good?
Yep.
Good. First, okay, where are we at? Item number 4, public hearing and action item preliminary plat for Jane Suggs. Hopefully I said that correctly. Thank you. Trilogy Development request to approve the proposed Blue Yonda preliminary plat, 40 acres located off Smith Road between South 5th West and South 14th West Streets. RPA 3S206 Echo 358410. Blue Yonder subdivision will consist of 10 duplexes, 35 fourplexes, and 94 single-family homes for a total dwelling of 254 units. Mr. Brock.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. So to summarize what is being requested this evening, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the commission, general public, what we have are 2 applications. One is a preliminary plat, which this property has already been annexed into the city. Its zoning designation is R4. If we look at the future land use map as approved in the comprehensive plan, it is residential. All of those different stars align. So, as we know, with a plat, had this come in with all single-family homes, duplexes, even fourplexes, if they were on their own single lot, we could just come in with a plat. We wouldn't need any sort of conditional use permit. But what makes this request different than the others is this plat contains a larger 10-acre lot, which the applicant wants to be under singular ownership to put multiple fourplexes on. And that's what triggers the conditional use permit. So we have those 2 different requests. We summarized them in one report, but they're separate than one another, and they also have different standards of approval. As you can see in the staff report, we'll be able to go over those standards. You'll be able to look at those as you deliberate and ultimately render your decision, whatever it may be. What we have is, and when the applicant shows it, we do have 254 total dwelling units, 94 of those being single-family homes, 10 of those being duplex buildings, so each of those have 2 dwellings in them, and then we have 35 fourplex buildings, each with 4 dwelling units. what you will see is right along Smith Road in the far southwest corner is where the multifamily is proposed, and then it kind of buffers out from less intense to more intense residential to less intense, with the most intense being the fourplexes, and then we go to duplexes, and then we go to single family homes, with single family homes actually buffering right against to the existing homes that are there. Other items that we want to consider along with the zoning ordinance is the comprehensive plan. Staff has reviewed the comprehensive plan, and I believe we found the points that we believe are most pertinent to this discussion. The comprehensive plan encourages multifamily residential projects next to major streets, which Smith is slowly becoming more and more of a major street, more and more traveled. It's a minor collector now, and with all the development surrounding the area, we anticipate that that's going to grow. And then it tells us to explore the allowance of a full range of housing types, from attached dwelling units and row homes to fourplexes, to be open to having a diversity of housing, which we have discussed before. Issues that staff foresees with this project, which we have provided you hopefully some answers or at least some additional information. The big one is, do we have water? Do we have sewer? Our Public Works Director, Richard Keedy, is not here tonight. I gave you each a memo, which is on your desk, saying that Public Works has reviewed the item. We are able to service it as presented.
Okay.
Outside of those, the next big one is traffic. And I believe a lot of people here from the surrounding neighborhoods, this may be also an item of paramount importance. The applicant has provided a traffic impact study, which we have provided the summary in all of your packets. We have found that the local roadways, as defined by general engineering practice, that a local roadway or neighborhood roadway typically has between 1,000 and 2,000 vehicle trips a day. With what we're seeing with the projected development, a lot of those roadways actually stay under that 1,000 mark. I think it's a small stretch that goes to 1,200. So all of them continue to have that local road status. I think it's also important to look at the projected trip distribution, which we'll get a map up here so the entire audience can see as well. As far as the existing neighborhood projected traffic, which will go through those neighborhoods, they say 15% to the north. I believe that's Edwards and Priscilla, and then we have 5% going eastward, which I believe is Bitterroot Road, with everyone else making their way to Smith Road and also South Fifth West, with those being the main ways out, and then depending which direction you're ultimately going. Are you heading towards the base, or are you heading downtown? Are you heading to go work in Boise or not? That's really what dictates that. And we can certainly expand upon those and go in deeper as the conversation progresses. With that is what staff has. One key thing I want to point out is with the original documentation from the applicant, they were hoping to utilize the conditional use permit as a method of asking for a slight deviation for a section of product for their side yard setback. I have conferred with council. We believe that the mechanisms being used are not appropriate. But that's not to say necessarily is that the right policy, but that is what we have in code. It is a minor deviation, but it is a deviation nonetheless. Normally, if people want to deviate from property development standards, we recommend on doing a plan unit development application. However, as all of you know, a plan unit development application is a little bit more comprehensive. It's a little bit more strenuous. So we just want you to know that that has been asked. We have received advisement from council that this isn't the way to do that, whether it's good policy or not. I just want that on the record for you and also ultimate decision makers who are city council. But that's what we foresee with the application package as of right now. And with that, I believe I have you teed off well to go into the applicant's presentation, unless you have any questions for me at this time.
One thing I would like just to put on, of record, because you mentioned it, the memo from Mr. Urakiti, Director of Public Works, and I'm just going to read it so it would be on record. Commissioners, Blue Yonder subdivision will be able to connect the City of Mountain Home utility services along Smith Road into Mountain Ridge subdivision at Bitterroot and Rolling Hill subdivision at Priscilla and Edward Street. And according to the report, there is adequate EDUs for this project.
Correct.
Correct. Any questions on the water? Because I know that's always a big concern.
No, I just looked at it. I did want to add something to that though. So was the traffic study required for her to do, or?
So the traffic impact study, per city code, the community development director and the public works director, there is discretion on when do we merit a traffic impact study, and when do we not. When ITD roadways are involved, we give them notice, and usually we stand by their notice, given that they have the expertise. The city doesn't have a traffic engineer.
Okay.
It was recommended by city staff during preliminary meetings. The applicant, I believe, understood that that would be needed given the number of dwellings that are proposed. It's very customary. There's been other developments, generally 40 or less dwellings. The amount of trips could or could not merit a traffic impact study. We always inform the applicant, though, that as city staff, we are advisory, that we could go to a meeting and you could have a planning and zoning commission say, well, it would be a lot easier to make a recommendation if we had a study. You could get to the city council meeting and they could say, well, we're going to table this until a traffic impact study is done.
Okay.
So what we try to do as staff is we try to foresee what is reasonable, because traffic impact studies are costly. They do take time. But in this situation, I believe it was a no-brainer as far as staff and also the applicant that a traffic impact study would be merited, especially since we're connecting into an existing neighborhood.
Right.
We would definitely have residents who would be concerned, rightfully so, of how is this going to impact existing roadways, and we have a traffic impact study which projects what those impacts would be.
Perfect. And then to confirm, so it is already zoned R4. So technically speaking, minus the fourplexes, it would already be zoned appropriately. Is that correct?
Technically speaking, yes.
Okay.
That's a really good point to make. But remember, they have to meet the design standards. They
Right.
have to meet the setbacks.
Okay.
Everything would have to be in place. But I would say, and I'll kind of pump this over to our legal counsel, that the discretion that you have over the standards of someone meeting a plat versus a conditional use permit. Conditional use permit, I believe, it's a greater burden for the applicant to meet than a preliminary plat generally. I don't know if that's a correct assumption.
They're two
Or
different-
maybe there's
they're
just
two
different
different-
standards at hand.
One is a subdivision process and one is use.
Process.
That's going on.
Yeah.
The idea of mitigating the potential for conflicts in uses in a condition. So you set conditions, and those conditions are already set forth in code that are to be met.
Gotcha.
The deviation from numeric standards such as setbacks and height restrictions, there's case law directly on point, and using a conditional use permit as a vehicle to waive those standards is not lawful. You can provide a waiver process in your ordinance. You've not done that. There is some language about a waiver, but it points to using the variance process. The variance process is very stringent, requires unique characteristics of the land that are not the fault of the applicant. So that's what you're left with.
Okay. Just trying to understand. Okay.
Any other questions for bring the applicant up? No?
None yet.
Man, come on up. Sorry to get you in a bad position.
It's the worst time to get sick.
I think I'm not the only one with allergies or something. Well, good evening, Commissioners. Nice to see you this evening. I'm Jane Suggs with Jim State Planning, 9839 Cable Car Street, Suite 101 in Boise. And I'm here representing Blue Yonder Subdivision and Trilogy Development. And thank you to the staff and guests for being here as well. I'm actually very pleased to present to you the Blue Yonder subdivision. I think there are a lot of wonderful things happening here in Mountain Home in the past few years, and I think Blue Yonder is really going to be added to that list of great Mountain Home addresses. I really appreciate the staff that we work with them through the application process, and we do appreciate the staff's recommendation of approval of both the preliminary plat and the conditional use permit. I'm going to walk you through a little bit of our process. See if I can do this. Okay. Next slide. How do I make that happen? I'm going. Oh, I was trying to do that. Okay, that one. Page down. Okay. So here we are with the zoning map, and you can see it's R4. And I don't know if I have a pointer here, but this is our. It shows up here, but it doesn't show up there. Our property is the R4 in the lower R4 piece. Let's see if I can do this. Oh, there we go. I don't know if it really happens that way. And then here again, it's another vicinity map showing the Blue Yonder subdivision, and you can see the subdivisions that are already around us. And most of those subdivisions are single-family detached homes. So we thought that we would take a little bit different approach and do something a little more creative. And you know the R4 zone actually has an intent for a mix of single-family households, multiple dwellings, and cluster developments. So that's as is defined in the code. So we're doing just that on our property. And let me show you what that looks like. Here we are with the Blue Yonder subdivision. We have the multifamily, and it is about 10 acres for the fourplexes located in the southwest corner of the site, and that's right on Smith Road. And then we transition to some smaller lots, and then, of course, around the perimeter on the north and on the east side, we're matching the lot sizes, the widths generally of the properties that are adjacent to us. Not quite in the north side because we have some cul-de-sacs on the north side, so they kind of spread out along our property boundary, but we're following the sizes pretty closely. Wanted to talk a little bit about how we follow the comprehensive plan too, and Brock's already mentioned this. The comp plan, as I read it, made it very clear that Mountain Home is lacking in multifamily development, so that is one reason we're looking at this higher density housing. And it also says that development approval should be tied to infrastructure availability, and you've just heard the memo from Rich Ricchetti talking about the availability of water and sewer. One of the issues that you'll see in this plan and as we go through this is we don't have water rights, so we are struggling to make sure that we have plenty of landscaping, as you can see here. Trees are very popular, providing shade when we're in this area of the state, but grass uses a lot of water. So what we show you on this landscape plan are trees that are being used along pathways and in our open spaces, but also using a kind of rock mulch, lava cinder mulch along in those areas where we might have shrubs planted, but we won't have big swaths of grass. So we've been judicious in that use of grass. The comp plan, of course, as Brock pointed out, encourages multifamily development next to major streets, and also mentions protecting residential property through transitional use, and that's sort of what we're doing here, is transitioning, and supporting connectivity between the neighborhoods. And I know that becomes an issue when you've lived on a kind of a dead end for a long time, but you find yourself now being connected to another subdivision. Those stub streets, we call them, are something that are built into almost every plan and every jurisdiction we see to help create that connectivity so people don't have to go out on major streets to go visit their neighbors that might be located right behind them in a new subdivision. We think that this plan is a really nice mix of housing opportunities, and Brock's already gone over 94 single-family homes, 10 duplex units, and again, the duplex units, I don't have a pointer, and I'm sorry I didn't bring something here, but yeah, thanks, Brock. Oh, what did I do now? Went too far. Let's go up here. There. The duplex units are those 10 properties there. Each one will have a 2-unit duplex on it for 20 total dwelling units. That's why those lots look a lot larger, because there'll be 2 families. They are connected, and they are 2 units on one. Unlike sometimes they're called duets if they have a property line between them. We are making sure that the single-family lots, as I said before, are adjacent to the existing homes in Mountain Ridge and in Rolling Hills, and then we do the transition. We also have a gridded layout, sort of a gridded layout as much as we could, and pathways, and they are able, make it easy. You can visit your neighbors pretty easily that way without traveling too far, and also you can get to the neighborhood parks, and you'll see in the northwest corner that we have a park for the neighborhood, and then in the middle of the fourplex community you'll also see we have set aside some recreation area, and here's a blow up of that. That's, again, it shows a little bit of how we have an open space of grass, but a lot of some of the area around it transitions to something that's going to be more like mulch. Again, trying to cut back on the impact to our water, not having water rights, so we'll be using city water to do that, and we just want to be very judicious with that. And then the pathway that leads right up to it, you can see. And then you'll see here in the community, the fourplex community, we have this kind of linear park. There's a shade structure there. Oh, I didn't say what was in, let's see. We have a playground and a shade structure like a picnic shelter in the community park, and then we have another picnic shelter and a half basketball court. It's very popular in a lot of our communities. You might recall it was only about a year and a half ago that Colonel Goodman, he was the commander of the Mountain Home Air Force Base, he wrote to the mayor and he said that housing is my #1 non-war fighting priority. And we've saved that letter because we think it's still important for us to recognize one of our bigger employers in Mountain Home, and making sure that we provide an opportunity for housing for the folks there at the base. And you have actually approved some projects that have addressed that challenge, and we appreciate that, and I'm sure they do too. But we feel that this location and this mix of housing will provide housing for the base, but also for existing and future residents that really know that Mountain Home is the place to be. It's really a great community, and it's growing, and it's got a lot going for it. So we think that this adds to that. And I talk a lot about homes, so let's take a look at a few of these. I've got a few, some of these were in your package, I think, some renderings of the fourplexes, because I know those are the ones that everybody's kind of interested in how they will look. And I've got them labeled 1-1, and this is a 1-bedroom, 1-bath of 4 of those. They're 2 up, 2 down. And this is another 1-1 kind of design.
These are the single families?
These are fourplexes. So there are 4 units in this building. And this is, let's see, what have I got here? 1-1. Okay, this is when we get a little bit larger. These are the 2-bedroom, 2-bath units. So 4 2-bedroom, 2-bath units. And another design. So you can see the developer or the builder has come up with some different designs. So there'll be a little bit of difference in things. And we show a mix of those in our plan. And then here's even a larger one, a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. Again, these are all the ones that are located in the southwest corner of the property. You can also see we also have in those 10 places duplexes. These are pretty attractive. These are renderings of the duplexes. Again, 2-car garages. One of the things to keep in mind is we have plenty of parking in our fourplex community, and we also provide plenty of parking, 2-car garages, and room for parking in front of the garage as well. So I think those are really attractive. I can't guarantee there'll be all that lawn in the front, but something like that. Here's another design. It's kind of a more cottage look. And then we have some single-family detached homes. Again, all of them have at least a two-car garage. This one right here is on a larger lot showing a three-car garage. So along our north and east boundaries, these will be some of the houses that have a larger lot sizes and the standard setback of 5 feet on one side and 12 feet on the other. And so three-car garages there. There's another design with a three-car garage. Now here are some of the two-car garages. They're on a little bit narrower lot. We're showing those anywhere from 52 to 60 feet wide on our plan. And this is where we start realizing that having the larger setbacks on the sides just uses land that we can't do anything with, and also often is misused. And I'll show you some slides on that. So these two-car garages are the ones that would be located typically in the kind of the in middle of the property, so not along the borders and not and just above the duplexes. So I'll show you a picture of the plan again. This is one of my favorite houses. I think this is the cutest thing, kind of a craftsman-y look. And again, most of these are built in other jurisdictions where they're 5-foot side yard setbacks, so 10 feet between the houses, and they fit in perfectly. Because it's the same builder, you don't have the conflict with the windows that you have if you have multiple builders, because the builder knows where the windows are on each one as they go. So that makes it kind of nice to have one builder there. I just love this little house. I think it's so cute. Some of those are 1-stories. We have 1 and 2-story homes. And here's another one that's kind of cute. And then, again, you'll see that I use your pointer. Where we're asking for the setbacks not to be 5 feet and 12 feet. We would like 5 foot and 7 feet setbacks on the lots that are smaller in this area right here. So until you're in the subdivision, you wouldn't even know it. And again, I'll show you a little bit about why that happens. We did a little drive around and found out that sometimes the side yards that are that wide don't get maintained. So there's a wide setback where it's just weeds and dandelions. This is grass, and it's got to be watered, I guess, by city water, but nobody's really maintaining it. And then the worst is you come up with people who want to put something there because it's a lot of land. And it starts creating code violations, I think, too. This is not something you would want to have in your front or side yard setback. It would be fine if it was behind the fence or in the backyard, but this is not something, this is, I believe, a code violation. It certainly would be an HOA violation, and we don't want to get our neighbors mad at each other. So, again, this is just one of those things where we think that asking for those side yard setbacks to be adjusted in just a few of those lots would be beneficial. It also, and I didn't do any kind of analysis on this, I just hear it from the engineers I work with, that when you have larger side yard setbacks, you reduce the number of homes. We could actually, if we have standard setbacks on those others, we would have to widen out those lots, and we would lose about 10% of our single-family homes. So we have 94, we would lose 9 or 10 lots if we have to put those standard setbacks in, because we have designed it with 52, 54, 56 foot wide, and when you take whatever 17 feet out of that, you can't get your standard house, two car garage house there, so we would have to widen the lots and lose lots. So I talked to my engineer about that, and he confirmed that we would lose probably about 10% of our lots. And this is not the time that you want to be doing that, because people need homes. Again, Blue Yonder subdivision meets the zoning code and the comp plan. It provides a mix of housing opportunities and a mix of lot homes and styles, as you've seen. And we have a neighborhood park and some pathways that really add to the connectivity. And I can't fight with an attorney, but I do think in your code there is a section, and maybe it's misrepresented in some way, that says that in the conditional use permit code that you can adjust setbacks. I believe the LUPA has identified that conditional use permits and special use permits are about the same thing. It's just you don't have a special use permit. You have variances, but variances require hardships, and we don't have a hardship. We're just asking for this to be implemented like a waiver, like the attorney mentioned, a waiver or a special use permit that will allow this. I just think that it's unfortunate that we looked at the code and thought, look, we're already filing for a conditional use permit. We would like to use that permit to also allow that. So we will ask for your approval of our preliminary plat and a conditional use permit that would allow multiple dwellings on one lot, which is the multifamily, and also adjust setbacks on certain blocks that would allow us to have 5 foot and 7 foot side yard setbacks instead of 5 feet and 12 feet. That is my request to you, as you would recommend that to City Council. City Council hopefully could take it under advisement from the attorney, who will probably advise them the same thing, that it can happen, but we would hope that they might make an exception for a waiver to allow that to happen. I will stand for any questions you have. I haven't gone over the traffic as much because I think Brock did a really good job of talking about traffic and the fact that with our number of units, 294 units, 254 units, because a multifamily produces fewer trips per day than a standard single-family home. We max out at about 2,000 trips a day. So we would never really overwhelm any of the residential streets based on the characteristics of local streets versus collector streets or arterial streets. So anyway, let me answer any questions you might have. And
Yes, yes.
Could you point me to the code section in the city code that you believe allows a waiver to be granted?
yeah, I can. Well, it's under the conditional use permit. It's not under a waiver. It just says supplementary conditions and safeguards, conditions attached to conditional uses.
Can you tell me the code section?
Yeah, it's 917-1 dash D 1I. Yeah. Allow a change from required setbacks. It does say that the commission shall review such requests in accordance with variance procedures unless otherwise provided
There we go.
for herein. Variance procedures are not variance standards. Variance procedures, in my world, procedures are the things you do to get a variance in front of you, which is notification and advertising and those things. So
Variance procedures, 9614.
So I have a few questions. Felicity, I want to go first. A couple things for the fourplex.
yes,
How many parking spots do you have allotted? 'Cause I did not, unless I overlooked, I didn't see it in the packet.
just a moment, I have it right here. I believe there are an exceptional number. Sorry,
Oh, you
got
can't,
too many papers right here.
I understand.
The Mountain Code, because there are 140 units, the code would require 280 parking spaces, and we're providing 316 parking spaces. Some of those are handicap spaces, so that provides 2.26 parking spaces per dwelling unit.
Then the next question I have, the park that you described right there in the left-hand corner, will that be I'm not sure of the right term for it. Dedicated, or it's not a swell or irrigation or runoff swell, is it?
You're talking about the park in the northwest corner.
Yes, ma'am.
No, that is not going to be a drainage basin.
Okay.
You'll see other open spaces. And those are located here here, 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 along this area here. And then in these kind of gray areas here, looks like there might be a little one right here too, where we actually have to run our stormwater for stormwater management. But we're not doing that in the park.
So,
Good.
one question for you, Mr. Cherry, or actually two. Do they have to pull a separate EDU for the park? Or is that tied into how would that work? Because the homes have one, but would that park need one?
I believe that there may be, it all depends whether or not the park space is dedicated to the city.
That was
I
my,
believe in this situation that it is not being dedicated to the
No,
city.
it's being designed so it can be maintained by the HOA. Sorry to break in.
then while I still have your, Mr. Cherry, have we seen a lot of, one thing that the applicant stated there was a lot of code violations between the deviations. Have you seen a rise or a theme of that?
We see violations of all sorts and sizes throughout the city. I've seen big yards that could look better, and I've seen small yards that could look better. That's my opinion. Sort of indifferent. If you want to speak about different and diversity of design, our comprehensive plan talks about a diversity of housing product, diversity of design. I think it's this body determining is it appropriate for the area. It's going to take away from existing neighborhood character. Is there enough of a buffer? And then it's all utilizing the correct mechanism in order to secure a deviation. With land use, and I think the legal will give the city council the same counsel as far as we don't believe this is the right mechanism. It doesn't believe that that couldn't be a good thing or that we shouldn't have sort of a waiver process. But land use isn't covered by ICRIM. It's not covered by our insurance. I don't want necessarily, if this was to receive a successful approval and we seek to utilize something which isn't concrete as an entitlement process, I think that gives someone a strong justifiable appeal towards an item.
While we're on the subject, Mr. Schroeder, the applicant talked about LUPA. I don't know if I'm saying that
Local
correct.
land use plan.
Yeah,
So can you explain that?
Sure.
What that means?
so what happened was, Burns Holdings was a company that sought a conditional use permit to exceed a height of a cement mixer plant in eastern Idaho. So they used a special use, conditional use, they used those interchangeably. So that was rejected because the conditional use permit was not the mechanism by which to vary a standard, which is a setback, lot coverage, a sort of standard. So as a result of that, the Idaho legislature amended LUPA to provide that that a city can adopt by ordinance waivers. A waiver process to waive that. It's not the same as a conditional use, it's a waiver. So the city can gather all its facts and provide a mechanism by which the standards can be waived. Mountain Homes ordinance, however, rather than just granting the city council the ability to waive those standards, pointed it right back to, and it says follow, and in this case, so LUPA set the groundwork where you could entertain a waiver, separate from a variance. Nonetheless, this code points you right back to the variance. And it does say variance procedure, not necessarily variance standards, but if you follow the procedure for variances listed in Mountain Home City Code, it requires a finding it requires findings in the procedures that are identical to those that is particularly with respect to unique characteristics of the land not brought about by the applicant. And so thus both the P&Z Commission and the City Council are faced with an inability to make that finding. Unlike, say, a food truck court sitting in the bottom of a hole in the ground. That's a unique characteristic of the property not brought about by the developer. So, in this case, and then the other thing is, for whatever reason, 5 and 12 side setbacks are very common, and I don't have any input from the fire people, but they're the ones that have chiefly the biggest amount. That and getting between the buildings to, for access for utilities, water, electricity, and that sort of thing. So you don't have any evidence, I don't think, unless the fire department has or hasn't provided something about the viability of such a waiver from 12 to 7 feet. So it's my legal recommendation that you cannot approve that, or you can't. I mean, you can recommend whatever you want, but I'm going to tell you that the city, you don't have the power unless the applicant follows the variance procedure to grant that waiver of those setbacks. Now, as I spoke with Brock earlier on this, if the city council wants to change that by amending the land use ordinance to either provide a waiver or reduce those setbacks, it's certainly within your purview to do that. But that's not what's in front of you right now. So.
Chairman?
Just, go ahead.
Brock, in your experience with, and Mr. Schroeder, in your experience with the timeliness of adopting new ordinances, what are we looking at?
I've changed a few ordinances in my short tenure here with the city. And generally, we need to comply with state statute. We need to meet the hearing thresholds. We need to do those. Yeah, 4 months or less, generally.
Yeah,
3
you
months or
could,
less.
depending on how often you choose to meet, you can get a well-motivated, well-intentioned, either waiver procedure or alter the setbacks themselves, the numbers. So 2-week, publication notice. It's a legislative act. You can meet jointly with the city council, which, as we saw, was probably a good idea. So that you're all on the same page. You have a joint meeting, you have a public hearing on the amendment, then you adopt the amendment after the public hearing. It's done. You could do it inside of you could do it in a month if the stars aligned.
Mr. Vice Chair.
Yes, sir.
Another thing I wanted to bring to light, we were speaking about minimizing setbacks as a design practice. There's been projects approved in the past, Thunderbolt Landing from way back one was one where they did have a section where they do have a reduced setback. But that was with a plan unit development application. So it is something that has been advised. I do appreciate the applicant bringing evidence to be persuasive is a good practice. And I don't think that's really where necessarily the deliberation needs to be for this group, because it is something you've approved in the past. It's really our code, like other codes throughout the state, need to be updated. They need to be and it's not, and the code is at best ambiguous. Miss Suggs, presented an interpretation which I don't believe is outrageous. I also trust our legal wholeheartedly. Our job is to provide you the best information for you to make the best decisions. And your recommendation could just be, we believe we should follow the advisement of legal. But no, this is a conversation that likely, when whatever your recommendation may be reaches city council, we'll probably have one more time with them as well.
Does anyone have any questions to the applicant before I open it up for public comment? No? Ma'am, you mind, just take a seat. I'm opening up for a public comment.
Okay.
Just a couple of ground rules. Sign in when you come in, so we have that on record and for the meeting minutes. And respectful, you can't yield your time to someone else. And once you ask a question, we will ask it back to the applicant to follow the Robert rules of meetings. So, anyone would like to come up and make a comment, please? Good afternoon, ma'am.
Thank you.
Can you state your name and address for the record?
My name is Carol Barnes. My address is 1442 Christopher Place, Mountain Home.
If you want, you can fill that out afterwards too. If you want, you can fill that out afterwards.
Oh, afterwards, okay. As I understood, the last part of your discussion was about setbacks and the legalities of that. All I know is you do have setback status, 5 and 12. And they've asked for the waiver. I object as a citizen to that waiver. And the reason why is because one of the words mentioned was fire. The closer the houses are together, the more possibility of setting another resident house on fire. So there is a reason for that distance, as well as access if the fire department would have to go between houses. And the other thing that I'm concerned about is water. You said that they had no water. They said they had no water, right? So they'd be on city water. Now, if we hadn't had the late spring water that we got this year, we would have been in big doo-doo. And so to add more homes that will use more water is a big major issue. And I don't know, I'm sure you're aware of it, the Mayfield Springs development. I understand the city council objected to that Mayfield Spring development because of the number 2 reason they sent a letter. Second, the county has repeatedly expressed fears about water availability and its effect on future development. This city council sent that letter in objection to the Mayfield planning community. So if they're objecting to that due to water, then why should we continue building projects here in Mountain Home if there is an issue with water? So that is another reason why I object. The third reason I object is because our schools, they're crowded, they're run down. The last bond issue didn't pass because homeowners do not want more taxes on their property. I think it was something like $250 per 100,000 you were assessed at. My home, that would take me up another $1,000. And therefore, you're overcrowding our schools by adding all these projects. So that is why I'm objecting to this project entirely. But I'm definitely objecting to the setbacks, because you do have a plan in place for that, which means that this development would have to eliminate some of their houses in order to abide by that. Oh, another thing too. I so appreciate the fact that the city sent me a letter telling me I was throwing garbage over the fence, and I thought it may be like, oh, my neighbor? No. Everybody in the neighborhood got these, with no evidence that anybody was throwing anything over the fence. And for 7 years I've lived there, and this person who owns the property never came and made a fire break between my fence line and their property. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Ma'am, on the last point, that's something probably be brought up to city council. They meet, with their next meeting next Monday?
Next Monday.
Next Monday. Then, Mr. Brock, I just want to address one of the concerns, because it might be a common theme with this project on the schools. By state statute, you have to give all public utilities in schools a letter on. Can you explain that process?
Yep. So state statute, LUPA, the Local Land Use Planning Act, requires us to contact all political subdivisions, every development, every zoning action. The Mountain Home School District is notified.
Okay.
Did you receive anything?
We did not receive any comment.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else?
Any specific, is that this microphone?
Wherever you want to go.
Okay. Rebecca Martinez, 1502 Christopher Place, Mountain Home, clearly. So you say that the homes are compatible and that you're going to put 2-story homes on the north side. That is going to triple the number of neighbors that I have and that they're going to be able to look into my yard. That does not seem compatible to me. Everyone else on that side is going to be doubled, where each house that's already existing is going to gain 2 to 4 neighbors on their property line. I also object based on the setbacks. You consistently say that water is an issue, that's why we're going to use gravel. But you want to cram in 10 more homes that are going to use more water, I'm assuming, than increase setbacks. You're increasing your impermeable surface, so the water's not going to drain. Are you using rhino snot or anything on those?
Ma'am, it's a public, sorry.
Sorry.
So it's a public hearing.
Okay.
So you need to address this group,
Okay.
and this group will address the applicant
Okay.
on your behalf.
We gotta do that.
Okay, no worries.
Nope, you're
Thank you.
What was your question?
I was going to ask if they're using any kind of concrete in the gravel areas, I know one of the commercial ones is rhino snot. If that's going to help, it usually is used to control dust and permeability of things like rock gravels or like decomposed granite type things.
And that's a brand name, Rhino.
It is.
That's not like that when you said that. I'm like, okay.
It works as like a cement or a bonder. You can add it in various levels to determine your permeability and your dust control. Because without using that, then you're still going to have weed control, but I guess it's an HOA. I do find it, if this is an issue that I need to take up with the Air Force, trying to state a proposed need for housing without NEPA environmental to back it up, if they're just sending a letter. When did the permit process start? Do you know when the applicant?
So the pre-application process for this, I would say a year.
A year plus.
Before, where there's pre-application meetings before they submit any formal application that's mandated by city code.
Okay.
That they undergo, and then the formal application was submitted, I would say, a few months ago.
Okay. In the beginning of August, shortly after the letter that Carol mentioned, where they said that we were all dumping, then someone started tractoring back in that lot without doing any kind of dust mitigation. I contacted DEQ, I believe, yes, and they said that they contacted the city of Mountain Home and that there was no construction planned for that site at that time in August. So I don't know if he didn't contact the correct people or if he was not notified. That's the question I have. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else would like to come up?
Christy Pierce. You guys all know who I am. I live in the Donna subdivision. I don't live in this area, but Brock and I have had this discussion, and I know there is a lot, and I apologize, I'm not looking at you, I'm trying to fill this out. There is a lot of construction going on over in the Smith and West Fifth area. As a precinct committee person, I can tell you that the commissioners did not adjust the boundaries of the precincts when they had to adjust their boundaries as commissioners when we redistricted because of the census. I don't know when that's going to happen again, but adding all these new houses is going to put a burden on that precinct committee person, because I know not all of them are going to register who move in to vote, But once they do register to vote, those precinct committee people have to keep in touch with those who are registered to vote. So if you have 900 people move in and 600 people register, that gives one precinct committee person 600 new people, and you don't have anybody else moving into any of the other precincts within the city limits. That kind of puts the burden on one precinct committee person. So Brock and I did talk about disbursement of properties, because this is probably the fifth or sixth development in the last year that has been in front of the Planning and Zoning Board, not just the new, the two new ones, but since I've started coming, this is probably the fifth or sixth development that has been approved or presented in just that area. So I just wanted to
Can I ask you a
bring that
question?
up.
On the precinct, is it,
So, are you not understanding what
well,
that
no,
is?
I just for
So-
clarification, so is.
So that's
it
either
out-
precinct 4 or 7. They're
Okay.
right next to each other.
Okay.
But I'm not sure where the boundary line is exactly. I'm sorry, 4 and 8, I believe. But they, I'd have to look at the precinct map for sure. But that would put a burden on either or of them, because there's so many developments going on in that area. And I just want to, it's kind of hard for us already. I have, I believe, almost 700 or 800 registered voters out of 2,000 people. And it's really tough for a lot of us to get out there. King Hill has a lot less because they're in an area that doesn't have a high density or a large population. So it's easier for them, but the more people you add, and I don't know if the commissioners are going to add more precincts or if they're going to shift the boundaries of the precincts. Because right now we only have 17 in Mountain Home, and there's a couple of them that are hard to fill. So I just wanted to bring that up for you guys, what we deal with on the ECRCC side as precinct committee people. So, thank you.
Thank you, Misty.
Park, just,
No. No, not, no.
Brock, on one thing, did you receive anything from, sorry, I was,
Let's get through the hearing.
okay, I was just gonna ask you about the, okay.
Well, yeah, go ahead. And then I'll answer that question.
Okay, anyone else has any comments or inputs? With that, we'll go ahead and close public hearing.
I get
Well, it-
rebut.
Yes.
Yes,
Well,
ma'am.
before the rebuttal, so does no one else want to testify?
Before we close it.
So the,
This is just for this
Yes.
item, right?
Yes.
I have an unrelated question, but it's not for this.
okay, so I suspect that she could probably add to her testimony.
So you can add, we just gotta make sure everyone,
Had a chance, yeah.
I get nervous, and I overlooked something that I had highlighted in my paperwork. And that is the CUP, which is the conditional use permit. That's for those multiple units. And first of all, I have a question. You asked about parking in that area, and she gave you a total amount of parking. I wasn't clear whether that was just for the apartments or for the overall.
It was just for the apartments, ma'am.
Okay. I wasn't sure for that. But I do object to that because that is a multi-unit mixed with single dwelling, and they have to get a special authorization from this council in order to do that. And in regard to that, this is, from my understanding, this is an HOA, homeowners association. Is that, am I correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so, I'm not aware of apartments coming under a mix like that with HOA. The other thing in regard to that HOA is, on there, there's two intersecting streets that come in with the other housing that's there existing. And I know certain rules and regulations apply to HOAs. And once those two streets interact, there's going to be people on those streets that may have boats sitting out front or trailers or whatever. How will that affect that part of the housing with those intersecting streets? and that was, can anybody answer that one?
Yes, ma'am. Once we close the public hearing, we will go over all the questions.
All right, thank you.
For that, no other comments. We'll go ahead and close for public hearing. This time, Mr. Schroeder, did you want to?
Yeah, so the organization of a county into voting precincts is for the purposes of facilitating voting. Whether or not there's no requirement in statute or elsewhere for those populations or boundaries to be equalized the same way as they are one person, one vote. So they're not necessarily representative, they're simply areas where people vote. As to the status of political parties, they're not an entity entitled to notice the same way that other entities are. So Misty's responsibility as a precinct committeeman derives from the rules of the county Republican Party and from nowhere else, other than she's elected pursuant to state code. So the placing of an additional burden on her or any other committeeman having to go out and knock on doors is not relevant to this discussion in any way. It's just more fun for all of us.
I'm just trying to be fair to all.
Oh, yeah. The disparity in the number of people in voting precincts is wild. Like precinct 8 is like 1,000 or something. And
Very large.
yeah, anyway, but that's not yours. Not your cookie to slice or whatever. I don't know, I just made
I'm
that up.
not gonna never slice a cookie. Do you have any questions? I'll bring the applicant up.
When the applicant comes back up.
Okay.
Yeah.
But applicant, yeah. Okay. Then come on, come back up.
Thank you, Commissioners. I appreciate a chance to talk to you about some of the comments that were made and also provide you some good information. Let me start with some stuff that I did not present. We have contacted the Mountain Homes schools, and it was about a year ago. And West Elementary at that time had a capacity of 582 with an enrollment of 449. Stevenson Elementary had a capacity of 474 with an enrollment of 247. Now, this was a year and a few months ago.
Sorry, could you repeat that last one?
Yeah, capacity of 474, enrollment of 247. This is from Lori Ireland. She is the administrative secretary at Mountain Home. Hacker Middle also had room 743 is their capacity, enrollment of 580. And Mountain Home Junior High capacity of 817, enrollment of 572. So it seems like the schools, can't talk about their condition, but it looks like that there's room capacity in the buildings. So I have some of that information if you need to add that to the record. Also, just wanted to let you know on the setback issue, just for your information, and I'll kind of talk a little bit about that some more, is Boise, Meridian, Nampa, and Kuna all have 5-foot side yard setbacks. Only Caldwell has a 6-foot side yard setback, which totals 12 feet between the houses. So I did a little estimate there. And also, kind of last minute, but I asked the builder to give me some understanding of value of this property. And the fourplex community is valued at $24,500,000. The duplex lots at $3,680,000, and the 94 single-family lots at $31,800,000. So we have about almost a $60 million project that we're proposing. I did not do a breakdown on what that tax revenue might look like. I just didn't have time. I didn't get these numbers until about 3:30 today. So I was trying to do that, but it just kind of goes to show that this is an investment that is being made in the community that might assist in some of the things that the city wants to do. To respond to some of the comments, I understand that the city did write an objection letter about Mayfield Springs, kind of a different area, different aquifers, how they're using a well for their potable water. And I don't know what kind of irrigation rights they have there. I don't know if they presented any kind of special irrigation there. There is an issue, and I think Ms. Martinez brought this up. If she is on a cul-de-sac and she's at the very end of the cul-de-sac and her lot is triangular, she will have more than one lot behind her because her back property line might be 100 or 120 feet in length, her back property line. And so we would not have a lot that would be 120 feet wide. So that's why she gets that. I didn't understand what was called some treatment of the gravel. She called it rhino snot.
Rhino snot.
Okay. Okay, I like it. No, we found that we do a lot of cinder, actually cedar shavings and stuff like that, and that really starts blowing all over the place, and you have to spray that to keep it down. And we find out these cinders that we're using actually are a little heavier, and they actually stay, but I will share that with my landscape architect that there might need to be some treatment on that, and that is definitely something the HOA, they don't want to replace it every year, so they're going to want to do something that they can keep that there, so it won't be a problem. Let's see. This is the first time I've ever had a discussion about precincts as part of a land use request, so it's very educational to know all the different people that are impacted by this. I didn't think about the precincts as I live in a community that's being kind of re-established, an older community that's getting some density added in, and so what that means to folks. And I didn't understand about the special authorization, again, that Ms. Barnes asked about. We will have, in the multifamily area, there will be a management association. It won't just be homeowners because there'll be rentals. The fourplexes are rental properties, and they're a great stepping stone to people who want to live there and live in that community, and then they can buy a house, or maybe they can rent the duplex next because it's got more space and a bigger yard, and then they can buy a home. And there are different sizes, as you saw, of homes with different features. There will be a homeowners association for the single-family residential. The duplexes, again, may be rentals. However, they will be separate on separate lots. So you could buy a duplex, live in one side and rent the other side, but there will be a management association that would handle that. Either there will be homeowners or a management association that will handle that. So there's always an opportunity there. Boats and trailers on the street, of course, that is one of the things that the HOA always has to deal with, is people parking things for a long amount of time. CC&Rs typically take care of that.
Mr. Vice Chair, and just a clarification on the RVs and boats comment. It's a great comment. Know that that's actually against city code. So we do have HOAs that do have that built in, but you're actually not supposed to leave your, and I know all of us have seen it. You're actually not supposed to do that. Note that you can call code enforcement. Government, unfortunately, when we do solutions, is a little slower than we anticipate, because when we go after people who need to move those things, we have to do so legally. We have to give them notice, and we have to write a letter. It's not as easy as a lot of us wish it was. It's just saying, let's just push it to your backyard. I'll get my truck and do it for you. But know that as far as that problem, in accordance with the proposed development, that regardless if there was an HOA or not, that would be an ordinance that the city would seek to enforce. And note that code enforcement is largely complaint-based, so any citizens who take it upon themselves to contact us actually help us with a lot, because we do have limited code enforcement officers. So,
Thank you.
a shameless plug to help with code enforcement.
Yeah, I think one of the things that might have come up was on this street, right here, it's stubs right here. And I believe because it's a stub street, it's kind of used as a storage area. That's what happens to a lot of the stub streets, and people park things there. A truck they're not going to use regularly, a trailer, and then it's going to be a real road now. It's going to be connecting to other roads, and people are going to be using that. Both people in the existing subdivision and the new. And so that is one of the issues that she might have been thinking about, is some of those streets, the dead end, people have been parking at the dead end, people have been using the stub streets that way. So that was certainly something to be cleared up. As far as construction going on, we're not approved. We hope to be approved. We will go to city council in the next month or two. Then construction drawings have to be prepared by phase, and the first phase is the single-family stuff that's on the east side. And then we wrap around, and then the last phase is the multifamily. We submitted a phasing map that might change with market conditions, but that construction drawings and approval hopefully will happen during the winter time. Get some approval, maybe start some construction as clearing and grubbing sometime next spring, late spring, early summer, and that's the best possibility. It could take longer than that. So to call someone and say, is some construction ongoing? I mean, it really isn't until it's an approved project, and then there's a lot of steps before we can do some work. The construction, utility work, the street work, and the market's changing, and we don't know. We submitted with 4 phases, but as the market has changed, we've already seen a few of our projects go from 80 unit phases, like single-family homes, to 40 and 30 home lot phases, just because the builders aren't willing to get way out in front of our market right now. But that's just my hearsay. I'm not a builder, but I have spent some time with them in meetings, and I know that they're just as anxious as the rest of us about the economy and how things are going. And no one intends to build houses that they can't sell, and it may impact our prices too. The prices I gave you were developed just today based on current sales, and the person who prepared it said these are pretty conservative, but there's no guarantee on that. But I mean, we're talking about a pretty big investment to make over the next 4 to 6 years in Mountain Home. What else can I answer for you?
Mr. Vice Chair,
Go ahead.
a couple questions. The first one I have regarding, are we going to have sidewalk, curb and gutter out here on Smith Road during, for the length of?
Yes,
Of the
there'll be standard sidewalk and standard curb and gutter and attached sidewalk. I believe it'll match up what's next door to us to the east.
As well, apartment area, or the fourplex area, I should restate. Have we had any feedback from fire on road width here? Are we aware of what that subcomplex road width is, and does it meet what our requirements are from the chief?
Commissioner Harjo, these plans have been reviewed by the fire chief and the fire marshal, and they have given us the okay. It is able to be serviceable with the apparatus we have should there be an event in that vicinity. And I believe also that the fourplexes are a sprinklered product, which dramatically decreases the ability for the fire to travel.
That actually brings up another question. Outside of the fourplex subsegment there, are these going to be city roads or maintained by HOA?
City streets. The streets within with the parking can't be public streets because we back out, but they'll be basically driveways. But they're wide enough, again, for the fire department. And then all the other streets will be
All the
public
surroundings.
streets,
Okay.
built to the city standard.
And also to be serviced by the city.
Vice Chair? Okay. So I'd like to answer Mr. Barnes's question about the EDUs and water. So how this works is if, we'll just say example, there's 800 EDUs, and that's how we increment out water, and all 800 get filled, but we need 900, that 100 does not get filled. We don't overfill EDUs. So once they're full, they're done. That means if they had a house that was completely finished and it had no water, it would have no water. So it would sit there without any water. Just as a comment, I know that was a big concern. That's a huge concern for a lot of people that come in. So I just want to make sure to clear that up.
And Travis, can you explain what EDU is?
So you can provide the point. So an EDU
I think it's
is a equivalent dwelling unit. It is the water and or sewer service that is needed to give a single-family home what it needs. Connection.
In all reality, connection between garbage, sewage, water, enough to make it an actual dwelling unit.
And if I could piggyback on that for a redirect to Mr. Cherry. We have seen a lot of developments come through. They have 1 year timeline to, correct me if I'm wrong, to plan and use that EDU. What happens if they don't?
So per our code, a preliminary plat, it's in our code that the stages of development, we have a preliminary plat and then we have a final plat. Once someone has their preliminary approvals, getting the applications costs a lot of money. Getting the engineers to do the roads, the piping, everything else is a lot more. That's why we have a preliminary plat process to say, you're good now, finish the rest. They have 1 year to complete a final plat. So Ms. Suggs brought up phasing. They can bring up a final plat for 30 homes. If we do not see a final plat in a year, the applicant has the opportunity to come to this body and ask for a one-time year-long extension of that preliminary plat, which this body has the discretion to give. The reason behind that is we understand that the environment changes. We understand next year conditions may be very different than it is now, and it's ensuring that land use decisions are made in a contemporaneous manner, and that we're just not giving any one developer the keys to the city, and then in 50 years, if this is totally different, they come in and they're like, but you told me I could develop it. And maybe it's something completely different.
Vice Chair, if I can. I have an interest in Ms. Martinez's property and the housing that backs up against it, the 2 to 4 new neighbors. Are those going to be 2-story units or are those single-story that she will be backed up against?
We haven't made a determination on what level they would be. There's variable 1 and 2 stories along most of the streets in the area, so we haven't determined which ones would be 1 or 2 story.
Okay, that would be like a final plat type thing, right?
It depends what you're alluding to.
So I'm alluding to, we had previously denied something that had a privacy issue. It was one among many issues of the actual problem, but a privacy issue of having a 2-story building backed up against a single-story unit and that privacy in general being violated. And that's what I'm getting at.
To follow up with that answer, Commissioner Ignis, is a conditional, technically it's up to the plat. So what you need to do is look at your conditions for a preliminary plat. A condition that you place upon a plat, there has to be some nexus to what we have in code. So if this body sees that the intrusion of privacy is significant enough, that is something you can do, is something that other bodies have done.
If it's not listed in our code and it's not in state statute, it's not something you can do.
Because it's not a PUD, it's a preliminary plat.
Yeah. So if it's not, I don't think a privacy interest is something that's addressed, is not protected in code. If you don't want someone looking in your backyard, you can build a fence up to that height. But you can't preclude someone else from building a 2-story house, provided it meets all.
Don't we have fence height restrictions here?
7
Yeah.
feet.
So you don't have, there's no ability to require that of someone else. In other
Sure.
words, you can't require someone else not to build a 2-story home because you think they might be able to peer into your yard.
That answers my question.
But Mr. Schroeder, the resident and the applicant can work out together like we've seen in other projects
Certainly.
on their own accord, not outside of this body.
Right.
That's something that's an option to both parties to
Yeah.
do that, to be equitable.
That's it, thank you.
I do want to clarify one other thing regarding the setbacks that she was referring to and the city's code. I'm not saying that the applicant could not submit a variance application. The applicant can submit and follow, and precisely to your point about the procedures. If you're following the procedure and you believe you meet the standards listed in code for it, then absolutely you can do that. So I'm not advising this body to deny it. I'm advising this body that it requires that they meet the setbacks or seek a variance pursuant to that procedure and see if it sticks. So,
I'd like to respond to that.
Yeah.
I've been doing this for a long time, and we don't have a hardship. So if you're going to request that I meet the requirements of a variance, which is a hardship on the land, I haven't been able to, I don't think I can argue that. If this went to a court, I would probably say the Burns Holdings was a height issue, not a setback issue. So I would say it doesn't really apply here, because when court cases are heard, they're generally very specific. So it was about height. I don't know. It got into the idea of what is a CUP and what is a variance and what is a special use permit. What I'd like to ask you to do is, I feel as if you want to be able to have some adjustment to the setbacks. I would request that you would say, understanding that there isn't an appropriate mechanism right now other than a PUD, which is a much larger process with much change. I mean, it's really for a different type of project. We're asking for one dimensional standard change. But if you believe that this is something that could happen, maybe you recommend that, we approve the project with an idea that we like this, that I don't know how you can do it. It would just be a recommendation that says we understand it and we might want to consider that at some time. And maybe we can work together on a waiver. And I mean, maybe we can do a development agreement that allows a special circumstance to happen. I'm always open to those. We don't typically those unless we're annexing or rezoning, but a development agreement allows you to add specific requirements to a property, and maybe that is a way that we could generally address this with the city council, and we'd be prepared to enter into that. All of your conditions that you want, including one that says the applicant will work with Mrs. Martinez to determine where she lives and which houses need to be 1-story or 2-story, or if they will change it all. But those are ways that we can add conditions or add a contract between the owner and the city to make things change. I don't know how you feel about a development agreement, but it seems like those are often used to create opportunities.
I think at the moment, if I can, at the moment, I think your best route, Ms. Martinez, is to talk to the developer. I think at the moment, that's what I'm getting from this. That's quite a rabbit hole Ms. Suggs brought out, which I don't understand all of it. But, I think that's your best bet as of right now.
And that's great.
Vice Chair?
Yeah, right.
Mr. Schroeder, we've had several touches on the ordinances that we have in our code, but we haven't actually read what that 17-1 or 9-17-1 D1I is. Can we enter that into our records here? And perhaps get your further assessment on if you have anything else to add.
917.1 supplementary conditions and safeguards. In recommending and approving any conditional use, the commission and council respectively may prescribe or require appropriate conditions, bonds, studies, reports, and safeguards in conformity with this title. Violations of such conditions, bonds, or safeguards, when made a part of the terms, shall be deemed a violation and grounds to revoke the conditional use. And so then it lists the ones. Conditions attached may be attached, including but not limited to those conditions which minimize adverse impact, control the sequence and timing of development. This is basically verbatim from Land Use Planning Act. Control the duration of development, assure that development is maintained properly, designate the exact location and nature of development, require the provision for on-site public facilities or services, and require more restrictive standards than those generally required in this title. Require mitigation of effects of the proposed development upon service delivery by any political subdivision, i.e. schools, parks, fire protection, highway, irrigation district, or Elmore County. Then it says, allow a change from required setbacks. This is I in specific. You can allow a change from required setbacks, off-street parking, fence heights, landscaping, and other standards particular to the development. Applicants shall specify in the conditional use application standards from which a change is requested. The commission shall review such requests in accordance with variance procedures unless otherwise provided for herein. So then, that sends you to 9-6 variance land, 9-6-14. And then you get into, as Ms. Suggs alluded to, the standard stuff for variances. But this, frankly, as procedure, sounds like it's got a little more wiggle room in variances. But I don't want to get into giving you legal advice. But what I'm saying
I know.
No, just,
I know.
you have to go down this procedure, and if you follow it, that could give, I don't know, I'm not gonna, but there we are.
understood. No, I just wanted to make sure that,
Yep.
that this body and all present had that ability to hear that and find that in text.
May I respond for one thing? As I look at that, and I don't disagree at all.
Yep.
And it goes on to say, because it says, it seems to imply that conditional use permit can actually be used for setback changes. I mean, it's no question about that. But then it says, the commission shall review the request in accordance with variance procedures unless otherwise. So you look at that code called variance, and A is procedures, and B is application and standards for variances. The procedures is not the same as the standards. So that's when I look and specifically at that. And it does require that the notice be published in the newspaper. Now, we didn't notice it for a variance, but we noticed that there would be a hearing regarding this. But provided to the owners adjoining the site. I mean, I actually notified people within 300 feet of the borders of the site. So sent over 120 notices to people about the hearing tonight. So, I mean, there are some procedures that we closely followed, maybe not specifically because we weren't looking for a variance. I'm just trying to make my argument that there should be, I wish there was wiggle room in your ordinance to allow just this. I don't want to lose the homes. We are prepared to ask for your approval without that, if that's what has to happen, but we will be making our argument to the city council again. And I'd be happy to find other waiver language and other codes, because I work in all the different jurisdictions, and maybe there's something that would work for Mountain Home. There's no reason to start all over with something, so it probably can't happen, or we could delay city council until we get that, but I know the developer is hoping to get approvals so that he can get started on phase one.
So, just to make sure, to clarify, you said you would seek approval without the setbacks to meet the standard. So how would that work, Mr. Chair?
Your staff report says, I mean, it doesn't mention the setbacks in your staff report with the staff approval. So we would ask for your approval of our preliminary plat. But if you don't grant the setbacks, we would need to go back in and revise our smaller lots to be large enough to put in those setbacks, meaning we would lose lots. So,
Mr. Vice Chair. One projected path that this could move forward is this conversation, this exact same conversation that has been occurring here. And I'm really excited to do the minutes and the findings of fact for this conversation, because it is interesting. Is Ms. Suggs will approach the council and have a similar conversation, and I believe city council may deem perhaps yes, we have a void in our code, and then decide, and then maybe even direct city staff directly pursue a code change. We want to have added discretion in the future for these sorts of situations. I'm not sure, and it probably, we did speak about phase projects. Let's say that it was to be approved with the initially requested condition, and then there was a code change for a waiver in the future. Nothing precludes the applicant after the fact that this is approved if we create a waiver process in the future for them to apply for that waiver and for it to apply to the development. It could not be as beneficial as far as their phasing plan that they have, especially if they're doing this first. But let's say if this was a second or a third phase, and we talk about our timing for a zoning entitlement for a zoning title amendment to get through the process, that is one potential path forward. I think a lot of it is ultimately going to depend how the elected body, who you make a recommendation to, whether they determine or not, is this a void in the code that we have to fix. I believe, Mr. Schroeder is going to speak to Mr. Fitzer. What my opinion of it, when we get to that stage in front of City Council, I will say it doesn't hurt to have portions in code which gives the governing elected body elected by the people, to make better decisions. And I believe a waiver would probably allow them to make better decisions and to make practical land use decisions and to have a process for that. But the short answer is we don't have it right now in code. And that's what Mr. Schroeder has been going after, and we want to give the applicant all means of access so they can have full due process for whatever they want to do. But I believe that it's a longer way, but if the City Council was to find that we need to create that process, that there is a way in the future that could be pursued to ultimately achieve what the applicant would like to achieve. If it's in their first phase, you may not get it right away. But we can speak about the setbacks, and we can go around and round and round. In my opinion, this body, you're going to make the best recommendation you have, but ultimately the City Council will have to decide with your recommendation, do we have a void in our code? And if we do, are we going to allow for deviations?
Vice Chair?
Yes.
Do we have a mechanism from this body to make that recommendation independent of this application and applicant in a manner that could parallel this application?
You can draft up an amendment to the city code, and you can entertain that on your own. And you can say, we're going to amend the zoning code. You're the authors of it. It's a duty of, you're the authors of the comprehensive plan and the zoning code. Ultimately, it's approved by the City Council, but the duties of the Planning and Zoning Commission are to create a comprehensive plan, have the governing body approve it. And then as a result of that, you're also the authors of the zoning code. And if there's parts of it that don't make sense and should be altered then you can initiate that yourselves. Absolutely.
Do you have any questions, or haven't asked any questions?
I am observing and I'm taking it all in. So
Mr. Vice Chair?
Yes.
Really quick, there were other questions and comments made by the audience as far as when a building permit was needed, trash, debris after that. I'm available after the meeting, and I will answer those after the meeting. So I just want them to know that they feel like their concerns have not been adequately spoken to during the actual public hearing. That after this meeting, I will be available to discuss those.
So, if I may, it's not a question, it's just a comment. So, at the very beginning, I asked for confirmation from Mr. Cherry if it's already zoned properly for what they are trying to put in there, and the answer was yes. The only thing that we are looking to basically create a variance on is going to be ultimately the setbacks, which right now, as I hear it, we do not have a procedure in which to either offer a waiver or offer any type of special use permits for that particular variance. So that is what I am observing.
Before we, I do have a couple more questions, just going over my notes of some of the residents. One resident, not sure who mentioned it, the second or third, talking about the HOAs. I know we talked about city management of vehicles on the street. And if I understood correctly, you can have a HOA for the duplex, the rentals, and a HOA for the single-family house. Now, will they march up or be under one organization, or how will that be managed?
They'll probably be separate because the rental properties will be under a professional management company.
Okay.
There's I can't remember the name of the MGM, I think is a management company that manages a lot of apartment complexes for this builder. And And the duplexes, likely as rentals, will be part of that as well. The single-family homes will have all various owners, and so that will have an HOA. So they'll be separate, just like you have anytime you have an apartment complex next to some single-family. I'm sure they'll have to chat with one
And
another.
that's where I was getting at, just to make sure though,
Communication.
if
yeah.
a resident had an issue with one or the other, there's a committee
Process.
mechanism that's built into that.
Yeah,
Just
and
answer
most
the
of the time,
question.
these are set up because there's some payment, right? So a professional management association has to be paid, and it's paid from the rents of the rental units. The single-family HOA is paid for by the homeowners, and that becomes a problem. So we try to minimize the payments for the homeowners, because we understand that Mountain Home has been plagued with HOAs that stop collecting and stop doing because nobody wants to pay nobody really wants to go and sue their neighbors for payment of an HOA fee. So, I mean, I know that might have been in the past, but we do worry about that sometimes and that's the same with the maintenance of the open space. This is trying to minimize the cost of that maintenance.
So, if I understood correctly from previous conversation, the park is used for everyone, so HOA will have to be established for
Yes.
all three entities just to maintain the common areas of that park then, since that won't be a city asset then.
Right.
Okay.
So you brought up something with the property management. Let's say if I'm an investor and I decide I'm gonna go ahead and purchase one of those duplexes, but I will not be living in one and renting out the other. But I have my own property manager. That's a no-go.
I cannot tell you that.
Okay.
That's a whole different operational part of this.
And I was
So,
just curious. I
yeah.
don't think it really makes sense to, but
and since they're separate, that could be the case, that everyone has one, but what's so nice about these, the way they look to me, is that it's nice when you have one management association to make sure the grass is cut, it's picked up, that everything is maintained, especially in the landscaping, and, so people are doing what they're supposed to do with those areas, and not putting a garage in the front yard. So we saw on one of those.
yeah.
I think I got all my questions either answered or asked. If anyone has any other questions?
No,
Nothing for me.
I'm good.
Did I hear a motion then?
I'm gonna need some help on this motion here for the conditional use permit. Verbiage wise. I get the preliminary plat, like, yeah,
Please
like,
break down
I
the
need,
rules.
I need help with the verbiage on this
Commissioner
one.
Agnes, if I'm inferring that you would like to make a motion of potential approval of the conditional use permit without the deviation of setback? Am I correct? And that's what
Yeah,
you're trying to
yes,
formulate?
that's what I'm trying to formulate, okay.
Is you would motion for approval of the preliminary plat as presented, as well as the conditional use permit without the request of a deviation of side yard setback.
Okay, Vice Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the conditional use permit without the setbacks, correct?
Setback deviation?
Without the setback deviation of 5 to 7 feet instead of 5 to 12 feet required by R4 zoning district.
Have a motion, to hear a second?
Second.
Second by Scott. Start with you, Scott.
Aye.
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 Aye as well, motion passes. Next item of business is new business. We have none. We have none. Old business.
There's
Preliminary.
yeah,
plat.
preliminary plat still
We
needs to go.
do, we have findings of fact.
Oh,
Well, no, I meant was this just the conditional use permit, not the preliminary plat?
It was just a conditional use permit because they had to be separated.
yeah.
For their development.
Right, so you need a second motion for,
So we need a second motion, guys?
A point of clarification, if that's the case, then technically, we would need to do another public hearing for the preliminary plat. So we would, if we're treating them different, just for the sake of,
If so, I'd like to
but I assume.
amend that and bring it back and reread.
So the problem is the conditional use permit is for the purpose of allowing multifamily dwellings on a single lot.
Right.
The preliminary plat is the thing that has a set number of lots on it, which will be different depending on the setbacks. And so, if I'm hearing what you're saying correctly, is that you intend to approve the conditional use permit to allow multifamily dwellings on those lots, but you would be denying the preliminary plat because setbacks.
You would have to, correct?
The reason, but the way that the initial request was formulated, even though it was not the right way, it was based, they were trying to request it with the conditional use permit, the deviation. But whatever you see as most fit is definitely what I'll.
But don't we need two motions to cover the separate applications in the sense
Right,
that we're...
one is approval for a preliminary plat, which has a set of findings that you have to make, and the other one's a conditional use permit, which is a separate set of findings that you have to make. And so, although the applicant has indicated here that they would intend to approach the council possibly with a plat that's different, so, yes, ma'am.
As long as I can respond, before I change things based on your recommendation I would not change the plat. I would keep the plat, you would deny it. It would go to recommendation, a plat denial to the city council, and we would ask them to overturn that with the understanding that there would be some mechanism that we would be able to establish in some way that would allow them to have the authority to allow the plat as it looks.
But that's what I'm getting at, is you have to deny the fact because we're not able to approve the setbacks with the conditional use
Right.
permit. Because the preliminary plat is
So we
not
need to strike the vote.
This motion should stand then, because we only motion the conditional use permit.
Right.
Yeah,
So that's what I'm
and
getting at.
thus
The
making
next
a
one is
second.
the next one is the
Correct.
plat, not an old findings of fact.
But you motion to deny the CUP, and we need the CUP to be approved so we can put all the fourplex units on.
On the plat.
So I think the motion, though, was to approve the COP without the setback.
Without
deviation.
the
Okay.
That was requested with the conditional use permit
Okay,
application.
got it, okay.
So your next item then is the plat.
Correct.
Of this project.
Right.
I'd like to make a motion, please.
Mr. Schroeder,
Yes.
before he makes that motion, I just want to make sure, because everyone in here has the right to due process as well. Was it understood when we did the initial public hearing that it was for both items, for the preliminary plat and the conditional use
Believe
permit?
so.
Was it?
That was under
It's
my
given two
understanding.
numbers.
And I want to make sure everyone understands that, because I'm not trying to take away anyone's opportunity,
Right.
testimony,
Okay.
just trying to do.
Wasn't that all together as one?
Yep.
Correct.
Yes. And now you're separating it and saying.
For the sake of the motions, yes.
Correct.
We have to approve one and deny the other. We have to, because of the setback, correct?
Right, the setback. is-
Yes, correct. The setback cannot be approved through a conditional use permit.
So what you're
So,
thinking about doing then is making a new ordinance for setbacks.
That's, no.
We will talk after.
Yeah. So, if I can, I'd like to make a motion,
Go
Vice
ahead,
Chair.
Travis.
I'd like to make a motion to deny the preliminary plat to allow 35 fourplex units, a single 10-acre lot, 94 single-family units, and 10 duplex units on approximately 40 acres.
Here, motion here. Second?
Before we proceed, should we be adding the reason in terms of what the specific aspect of the plat?
It helps your findings of fact.
Right.
It does.
So you'd
So
like me
would
to
you be-
voice the fact that the setbacks were the reason that the preliminary plat?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I believe.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion again, please.
Right ahead.
To deny the preliminary plat to allow 35 fourplex units on a single 10-acre lot, 94 single-family units, and 10 duplex units on approximately 40 acres due to the fact that you cannot approve a 5 to 7 foot setback instead of a 5 to 12 foot, and the required R4 zoning and a conditional use permit.
Second?
So what you just got again?
Aye.
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 I as well.
Who seconded that? Scott?
Sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
It's interesting.
Yes, ma'am.
That was a new one.
I know. Planning, like, this is upper level planning.
That's what I was planning. So, next item on the agenda, thank you for your time, ma'am. New business, we have none. Old business is action item approved finding of fact for Tim Mocha, Hayden Homes, PZ application 22-92.
Vice Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
Yes, ma'am.
I move to approve the findings of fact for application PZ 2292.
Here a second.
Second.
How much, Travis? Scott?
Aye.
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 I as well. Next item is approval of finding of facts for mobile food truck yard. Application PZ 22-93.
I'd like to make a motion, Vice Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
I move to approve the findings of fact for application PZ 2293.
Can I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Scott. Travis?
Aye.
Kristen?
Aye.
Aye.
I as well. Motion approved. Department head items, monthly code enforcement report and monthly building permit report. My comment, I like the format that we went back to, so that's my comment on that. Does anyone have any questions on these reports?
No.
No? Items requested by commissioner or staff, do you have anything for us, Mr. Cherry?
Sir? No? Okay.
Nothing?
I have one. Procedurally, one of our, I think, not confusing points, but just a point of bottleneck in our meeting tonight was having both of these presented
At the same time.
at the same time on the same staff report, in the sense that it might be causing some confusion procedurally, that we're recognizing both of these in the same at the same time in the same motions, when there are abstract concepts between the two, while they're obviously very related. If we could kind of just take that under advisement and maybe look at a way to even just presentationally how to break that out.
If I can, if we did approve it, sorry to dig on that, if we did approve the CUP, we'll just say we didn't have these setbacks, I know this is an abstract idea, but we would have had to approve them separately regardless, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
But Commissioner Harjo, I think it's an excellent point. There's been times in the past where we've separated them with different reports entirely to try to keep it cleaner, to try to keep the thinking just a little bit better for both decision makers and also for those wishing to participate in the process. So that's duly noted. It's something we've done in the past, and hindsight is 20/20.
Sure.
For this one, if we could have gone back, I think you're correct. I think it probably would have been easier to digest had they been in two separate staff reports instead of compiled into a singular staff report.
Would it also give us a little bit more room to pivot in the instance that, as I think both you and council had mentioned, that, statutory notice periods for both of those, like, just kind of protecting our own. If we do have to abstract those two applications, that we're not having to then delay again to give ourselves more time for notice.
Understood.
Good point.
Anything else, commissioners?
No, sir.
That's one for me.
None? With that, we're adjourning the meeting at 7:48.
Somebody had a question about conflict of
Ready, break.
interest.
Oh.